Hello and welcome to this lecture where we are continuing from the installation of the VirtualBox that we done in the previous video. Now in this section, what we want to achieve is to install the Microsoft Server 2019. So I installed the VirtualBox in the previous video and we've done a reboot and the machine has rebooted. Now we want to go ahead and do the installation. So you'd open VirtualBox from your desktop, and when that's open, what we want to do is we want to add a new instance. We want to create a new virtual machine. So you go to the button that says new, and then we'll give the server a name, say server 2019. And we have the option to choose where it says ISO image. So we choose the ISO image. So go to our downloadables and I would go for the 2016 ISO and click OK. So you'd see that it has seen that it's a 2019 server and it had automatically populated Microsoft Windows and 2019. So we'll skip this section in the sense that normally you have the option to get the VirtualBox to install the server for you manually, automatically. But because I want to take you through the process on how to create virtual machines with VirtualBox, for instance, we wouldn't go with automatic installation. We'll do it manually. So I'll skip this and I'll click next. And this is where we have to provision resources for the virtual machine. Now, ideally, you want to be going for about 4 gig base memory and maybe 2 or 3 cores. So I will start with, for instance, in my case, I would go with 8 because I have other plans for the server. So if I give it enough RAM now, that should be enough for me throughout the course. So there might be some other services that will configure on the server, but if the server is just for a single purpose, like for instance, you just want to use it for a use service like syncing or any other stuff that doesn't really need enough resources, from a VirtualBox point of view, from a lab point of view, 4 gig is enough. So I would go for 8 gig for now, and I'll go with 2 cores, and I'll click next. And you're being asked to allocate a virtual hard disk, and you'd go with 50 gigabyte. And that's it. So now that the server has been configured from a setup point of view, all we need to do now is to start the instance. So this is going to take us through how to install a 2019 server. So this is basically just like how you image a machine. Some of you that might have experience with how to image machines, like when you install a Windows 11 or Windows 10, it's basically the same approach. So when you're in an interview and you're being asked, how do you install a server? The answer is obviously identical to how you install any operating system. It has similar approach, it has similar interfaces, and we'll be exploring that in this video. So, just gonna close this. So we have the option now to begin the setup. So you can see that it's basically the same as if you're installing Windows 11 or Windows 10. But now it's server. So Windows Server 2019, and then you're being asked the languages you want to choose for install. I'll keep this as default. Click next, and we'll click on install now. So the installation procedure, normally just like Windows operating systems, you're being asked to choose what type of operating system are you looking for. So we want to go for the desktop experience. The other ones that's not called the desktop experience, they're basically just a user interface less operating system where you can only interact with it using PowerShell. So we would go for the desktop experience and click next. And I don't think anyone actually has the time to be reading these licenses. And we would go for custom install. Now, when you are trying to do an in-place upgrade, assuming you already have a server, for instance, you already had 2016, and you want to upgrade the server 2016 to 2019, it's the same approach, but when you get to this step, you'd use the upgrade function. Probably if we have enough time during the course, we might do practicals on how to upgrade this server from 2019 to say 2022. So for now, since this is the first install, you want to demonstrate how you know how to install a server. Click on custom install, and I have this drive allocation that was given to us by configuring the virtual machine. So that's a 50 gig virtual hard disk. So I'll click next. This normally takes a few seconds if you're installing a new Windows operating system. It has finished copying the Windows files, it's getting the files ready, and it's taking this sweet load time. Once this is all done, the next phase so that's done now, and all we need to do is to reboot the virtual machine. So what I'll do is I'll just click on restart now, and the virtual machine will restart on its own. And we are here, so now we have to set up a password for the local administrator account for the server. So I would use this custom password. Click finish. So this is the first time that the server has booted up. You'd realize something different compared to Windows 10 standard operating systems. Normally, Windows 10 operating systems, you see this kind of wallpaper as well, this lock screen, and it would just ask you to sign in. But with the server, one key difference that you can use to differentiate between a server and a basic Windows 10 operating system is the press Control Alt Delete to unlock. So whenever you see press Control Alt Delete to unlock, that should tell you that it is a server. So in an interview, you're likely going to be asked, what is one key differentiator that you can tell between a server and a Windows 10 operating system? That's one key thing that you can use to answer the question. So I'm going to go ahead and press Control Alt Delete. And normally I just use input keyboard, and I would go to insert Control Alt Delete. You could do that using your keyboard. We're going to sign in for the very first time in our local administrator account. Type in a password and hit return. So we have to wait for the system to boot up and apply some other fixes. And voila, this is our server 2019 running. And I'm going to just say yes to this network prompt. This is basically asking if it can use the internet access from the host, which is my PC. Click yes. And automatically, whenever a server is signed into or is logged on, this server administrator platform normally loads up, which is called the server manager. Now, server manager is where you would be configuring most of the services that a server runs. So I'm just going to minimize this, and we'll come back to this in a sec. So ideally, you have this Windows Server 2019 data center evaluation year, and we are using a free license, which is valid for just 180 days. And what we realized that it has the same interface as Windows 10. It has the same taskbar. It has the same time and date. It has Ethernet Explorer, and you have a start menu. And it's the basic control and feel just like a Windows operating system like Windows 10. You can go to Control Panel. And the Control Panel gives you the same kinds of commands that you'd have on a Windows 10 operating system. So this is basically just a Windows 10 operating system, but it has server manager configured into it that can help you run services that can be available on a network. So any machines that are on the same network can get access to services that are running on the server. So this is something key, something basic, something fundamental that as a sysadmin you need to be familiar with. Now, what I just realized was this is one key thing. So this is a virtual machine and it looks like it's running adequately enough, but it's not really running smoothly that I would like. So probably the number of cores that I gave it is not enough for it to run smoothly. It has enough RAM, and what I'll do is I'm just going to double check my hosts, which is my PC's resources, to see what's what. So you can see that because I'm running the virtual machine on the machine, at the moment I have used mostly all of my memory. So that means it's taking a chunk load of memory. Another way to double check is when you go to processes, you can see that VirtualBox, when it comes to memory, 94% is used at the moment. And obviously I have Google Chrome running in the background. I have whatever I'm using to record this course in the background. And you can see that the most is this VirtualBox. So that's another thing to keep in mind whenever you are running or setting up this lab. You need to have your machine itself should have enough resources. You can see that my machine that I'm using has roughly 16 gig memory RAM, which is enough just to get this installation set up and run simultaneously using the PC itself. So what I'll do is, just for training purposes, you might be faced with questions like if you have a virtual server that's running and services are running too slow, and if the server is too slow to respond and stuff like that, how do you handle it? Probably, since it's a virtual machine, you need to see if what are the resources that are being overused, what's the overkill. You probably need to add some more resources, for instance, more cores or more RAM. I have enough RAM, so I'm just going to increase my cores to at least from 2 to 4 and see, does it now make this virtual machine that's running the server 2019 run more smoothly. So to do that, I'm just going to close this. I'll go to File, I'll close, I'll power off the machine, and then it should take me back to the VirtualBox manager. So this is the instance. I'll go to Settings, and I'll go to System, and I'll go to Processor, and I'm giving it 2 cores. So I'm going to move that to at least 4, more or less. Click OK, and then we'll start the machine again. And then we'll just explore some of the key things on the server that we need to make sure that we have. For instance, when it comes to internet and internet browsers, normally the servers come with just Microsoft Edge. And Microsoft Edge, not necessarily Microsoft Edge, but it's called Internet Explorer, which is already a cake. Okay, so I just added that number of cores, and it looks like by adding that number of cores, I probably has given it enough resources, so much resources that it's actually not giving my host machine enough resources to run the machine properly. So this blue screen that you're seeing, yes, the virtual machine can't run because probably the resources that it needs, it has been given it, but then it has taken place of what the actual host machine needs to use. So these are some of the things that I'm glad that this is all happening, so we're documenting it. How to solve some of these problems when you're on a job, demonstrate your human resource capital. So what I'll do is, while I have this running with this problem, I'm just going to go back to Task Manager and see, when I added those cores, does that mean that it has given my PC a breakdown? No, it hasn't. I actually have more memory available now compared to when I added the cores. So probably not a big issue. All I'm going to do is to reboot this virtual instance. So I'll go to File, power off the machine, and I'll start again. OK. So I'll input this keyboard, Control or Delete. It was quicker to boot up this time around compared to before. And it looks like it's running smoothly now. And just a side tracker. So this prompt is basically normally when the server gets shut down mysteriously for no reason. This normally comes up to ask you what happened, and you need to be truthful. So outer unplanned. I'll just cancel this, and the server manager is open again. So you realize there's not a lot of software installed on this, even though it's a Windows 10 like operating system. So if you wanted to visit the internet or anything, you wouldn't have the resources to do that. Like, we don't have Edge. If you want to visit the internet, all you can do is Internet Explorer, and there's so many security protocols applied to this Internet Explorer that's not going to allow you to use it like you normally use. So I would just not use recommended settings. I'll just show you first. If I go to use recommended settings, click OK, and say you wanted to go to google.com. You're about to view web pages over a secure connection. OK. You'd realize that you keep on getting these blocks, right? And I'm just going to add Google, and I'll add, and I'll close, and now it loads. So any page that loads on this Internet Explorer, because of their security protocols applied to the browser, you keep on getting all of these. So normally what some people recommend for best practices is that you need to install maybe a browser, a secure browser, maybe Chrome or Edge. If you need to install some piece of software on the server, you can quickly go online on that server and run it. Otherwise, you have to manually get it and then transfer the documents or the files onto the server and then run it from there. So many other ways. So it's handy to have an internet browser on your server. Or ideally, you can go in and configure the security settings on the Explorer and allow it to not check for those things. I normally see it as a hassle. So what I'll do is we are going to get Chrome installed on the server, because you might need it to install certain things. So if you happen to want to be able to just move folders from your host machine to the guest machine, for instance, the Chrome setup that I was talking about, there's a couple of things that you need to set up on the VirtualBox, which we should have covered in the installation of the virtual machine section. But it's good as a learning process in the sense that you are only a master of your craft if you're able to solve problems as they arise, and it becomes a learning curve. So in the previous snip, we realized that when we try to copy over a file onto this, or maybe not, we had an error. We had to install the guest additions. Now, the guest additions is a piece of ISO that is actually already on your machine that you have to install. And to install that, you need to go to Devices. If you don't do this, you wouldn't be able to move files and documents from your host machine onto the virtual machine. So you go to Devices, and ideally you'd go to this Insert Guest Additions CD image. And then when you insert it, it would then auto-mount the disk, and it would start running whatever application is mounted. So for instance, if you insert, it should now be mounted here. Sometimes it wouldn't mount and you might get an error. And to resolve that, you can do it manually. To do that, you go to Devices, you go to Optical Drives, and you choose a disk file. You choose a disk file, and you would just navigate to the guest additions and choose it. Once that's opened, another way to also mount is also still go to Device and choose this image, and you can manually select it by clicking on Add, and then you mount it here and then Apply, and then it becomes, once you use this approach, it then will appear visible when you go to your File Explorer. So when you go to a File Explorer, you now have the option it's mounted. You can open it, and then you can run the guest additions software. So when you double click it, it's basically a next install. You click next, and then it would ask you to reboot the virtual machine. So once that's done, then you can set up a way that you can be moving files and documents from your host machine onto this one. Or you can set up what we call shared folders. So shared folders is when you choose a directory on your machine that can be linked onto the host machine. For instance, I have a folder called downloadables. If I go to downloadables, I have Chrome software here, and I have all these other software here that I might be using at some stage. So what if I want to just have this whole folder visible to the virtual machine? That's what we call shared folders. So to set up a shared folder, you go to devices, go to shared folders, and you set up a new shared folder. And over here, it asks you what you want to set. So you click on this add button, and then you choose a path and choose where you want to mount. So for instance, I want this folder. So I choose this folder, select, and I click on auto mount, and then you click OK. Now, I already have it mounted. That's why it's not giving me the option to click OK. So once that's all done, then you can now have, when you go to this PC on the virtual machine, you can now have this path, which is to your host machine. So when I go into here, I would have access to the same documents that are in my downloadables folder, right? So what I wanted to do was to install Chrome. So go to Chrome, and I'm being asked, the security protocols have been running at the moment. So I'll click run anyway, and this would install the Chrome browser. So that's just some bit of troubleshooting that we've just done there, which we should have covered in the VirtualBox installation. But that video was basically to how to install the VirtualBox, and the configurations at the time did not come to plan. But when we realized, okay, how do we make things more easier when we are going forward, and that's when we had to realize that we had to install these other extensions. So we installed an extension pack in the previous video, but then to be able to move files and documents in between your host and your guest for easy running of softwares that we need to install quickly, you have to go through that setup. So how to get the guest editions. So that's set up. Now we have Chrome on the server. So whenever we log into the server, we don't need to go through this Explorer, which isn't advisable, but that's how you do it. Get a setup file, and then you can run any installation on your machine. Don't sign in and skip. And we have Chrome. I'm just going to pin this to the taskbar. It's actually pinned already. I'm going to close this. So this is the server running at the moment. What we need to explore is to just see what are some of the services that we need to be aware of. So when you have a server, there's some basic things, some basic configurations that you need to set up. We would explore that in the next video. This video was just to install the operating system, which we have done, and we wanted to just quickly install a browser on it and see how we get on. So now that we have that installed, we will go on to the next video to see what are some of the configurables that we need to configure on a server, primarily so that it enables us to go on with the other installations. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.